All right, so we've got a plan. We're going to choose our confidence level. Of course, in this course, you'll just be given most times the confidence level you want to shoot for. You'll either use the critical values you're used to finding off the z-tables if your sigma value is known, and if your sigma value is unknown, you'll use the t-value based on the sample you do have. Actually, a quick thing to point out here, this table, the t-table I've got here, gives you both sets of critical values. So if you have a 95% confidence level you're shooting for, and you know sigma, then you will just use this bottom row, because that's the z value. If you don't know sigma, then you will use one of these values based on your sample size. If you can hear those sirens, that's my ride. Sorry about that. I hope they'll cut off soon enough. But let's get to the example here. Let's say I've got 100 people in some area, and we find that the mean income of those 100 people, so I take all their incomes, add it together, divide by 100, that comes out to be 45K. And the standard deviation, I've also crunched those numbers for you. 2,750 was the standard deviation there. So I want to know what is the mean income for all the people in the area, not just the people I sampled. And I want a 95% confidence level because I can't think of any reason not to use 95%. So that's going to be my confidence level. Let's do something a little different here. Let's start with the end in mind and work our way backwards. Because this is what I eventually want to say. I eventually want to have a confidence interval, right? I eventually want to say, well, I don't know exactly what the mean income is, but I do know with 95% confidence that the income is somewhere between this lower bound, whatever it is, and this upper bound. So I need X bar and E. Of course, I'm already given X bar, right? I was told straight up that the sample mean was 45K. So I'm looking for 45K minus something and 45K plus that same thing. Also, since I don't know the population standard deviation, right? I know the sample standard deviation, but not the population standard deviation. I'm going to have to use the new t-score or t-value, critical value, and sample standard deviation. So that's what I'm going to have to use here. So I need S. Well, I already know S, right? S is 2750. I already know N. N is 100. So all I need now, so I can get rolling, is this T value. I need to do a little T testing here. So T of A over 2. I'm going to use N equal 100. So that gives me 99 degrees of freedom, which is, of course, not on the table. So I'm going to use 100 anyway. Whoopsie. And that gives me, let's see, for 95% confidence level, 1.984 as my t-value. And honestly, that's all the statistics I have to do until I start making conclusions. Because from here till then, it's just number crunching time, right? In go the numbers into my formula, and I get about $545.60 as my margin of error. So I subtract that value and add that value, and I can say with 95% confidence that the true population mean is somewhere between 44.4K and 45.5K, give or take. That's a pretty narrow margin. It's a pretty narrow window here, pretty narrow interval. And the reason why it's so small is because we asked 100 people for an area, right? It's not 100 people for all of America. It's 100 people for just like maybe Donaldson or Laverne, right? It's a small area here. And 100 people is a lot of people. So let's look at, what if I just did 5 random people? And I'll still use the same values, right? I'll still use X bar to be 45K. I'll still use the standard deviation. We'll assume it's all the same. But this time it's only coming from 5 people. How less certain am I, or how much wider is my confidence interval? Well, my critical value is a lot higher now. Let's see here. I'm looking for 5 people, so that's a 4 degree of freedom system, 95% confidence level. I'm looking at 2.776 as my critical value. I then do the number crunching, and instead of having like a $400 window here, or a $500 margin of error, I've got a $3,400 margin of error. And that's making a much wider window. But that's that example worked. More to come.